very rare genetic disorder, and that is the Besson-Convict syndrome. Epidemiology of this disorder. Name use, there are different types of name used for this disease, that is abetalipoproteinemia, Besson-Convict syndrome, MTTP, microsomal triglyceride transfer protein deficiency, and familial apoB-lipoprotein absence. The pattern, it's a rare disorder, usually begin in infancy. Autosomal recessive disorder, as we mentioned already, can affect both male and female, often recognized after persistent fat malabsorption. The teaching point: if you find any of the infant or patient with steatoria, very low cholesterol, VLDL, LDL, or ApoB, you can find the disease, that is abetalipoproteinemia. Early detection is important, so the vitamin replacement therapy can be started. Genetic basis of this disease: main gene MTTP, microsomal triglyceride transfer protein required for the assembly of ApoB containing lipoprotein. Biliary pathogenic variants cause classic disease. Autosomal recessive disorder, both genes copies are affected. There is a difference between normal and abnormal lipoprotein assembly. In normal MTTP, that leads to chylomicron and absorption of VLDL and LDL. But in case of genetic defect or genetic mutation or genetic disorder, MTTP defect, no export of chylomicron, VLDL, LDL to the main assembly and towards the tissues. Result: absent, very low ApoB, VLDL, LDL, and postprandial chylomicron are detected. Besson-Convict syndrome, MTTP, it's a rare autosomal disorder. ApoB containing lipoprotein assembly leads to fat malabsorption. There is a deficiency of vitamin E, A, D, and K, causes multi-system disorder or disease. Major organ affected by this are the GIT, nervous system, eye, bone, blood, and liver. The roadmap is important. What do you have to find through pathophysiology, and what are the defects you find in these kind of patients? Basic defects and pathophysiology, organ-wise clinical environment, and role of vitamin E, A, D, and K, long-term treatment strategy. The pathophysiology is very important, and that is go through the step-by-step pathophysiology. MTTP mutation, impaired lipid transfer, leads to ApoB particle failure, and therefore the chylomicron VLDL assembly block, or it can't be absorbed to the tissues. Fats not transported properly, which leads to fat soluble vitamin failure like vitamin A, D, K, and E, which leads to the tissue damage like retina, nervous system, and blood vessels. The free problem is not simply low cholesterol, it's a failure to transport dietary lipid and fat soluble vitamins to the tissue. GIT and the growth manifestations are very important. Early signs: failure to thrive, vomiting, chronic diarrhea, steatoria, bulky fat, foul, smelling stool, abdominal distension might be happen in these patients, or poor weight gain. Chylomicron causes the failure of triglyceride absorption, which leads to the chylomicron formation failure, intestinal fat handling, which is impaired, result in fat malabsorption, deficiency, and fat soluble vitamins. The neurological involvement included vitamin E deficiency causes oxidative injury to this neuronal membrane and long axon. Patients may develop neuropathy, ataxia, weakness, and areflexia. Early treatment help reduces progression of neurological disorder. Oculoretinal involvement vitamin E deficiency contribute to retinal dysfunction or night blindness. Pigmentary retinopathy may occur in untreated patients. Regular ophthalmic follow-up is important or required. Bone involvement. Vitamin D deficiency causes the bone demineralization or disrupt the bone mineralization. Rickets, osteomalacia, bone pain, and fracture risk may occur. Calcium and vitamin D sports are very important. If there is no vitamin D or very little vitamin D, the calcium may not absorb in the bone. That causes the free calcium and which leads to the calcified arteries in later ages. The hematological involvement, acanthocytosis, which is very important to check up with irregular space, variable size, spiky projections may occur in the cell membrane. Vitamin K deficiency increases the tendency by impairing clotting factors activation. Coagulation monitoring is a part of long-term care. The hepatic involvement is very important. Disorder may cause hepatomegaly, enrollment of liver. In some patients, there is excessive lipid inside of the hepatocyte. Liver status should be monitored over regular time interval. Why vitamin E is important in this therapy? And that is the high dose of vitamin E replaces the missing antioxidant defense. Vitamin E localizes with lipid membrane. It neutralizes negative oxygen species or reactive oxygen species and interrupts lipid peroxidation. Neurons and red blood cells membrane are stabilized. Progression of neurological and hematological injury or disease or disorder may be slow. Integrated treatment strategy, treatment pillars, dietary management, vitamin E, vitamin A, D, K, monitoring growth, neurological status, ophthalmology, clotting profile, and liver health should be monitored over time. The prognosis and key messages. Early diagnosis and strict treatment can delay progression. Untreated diseases may lead to severe neuro and retinal complications. Adherence to vitamin therapy and follow-up is critical for those patients. One slide memory is important. MTB defect, absent ApoB, lipoprotein, fat malabsorption, fat soluble vitamin D is important. GIT tract, eye, neurological, and blood manifestations should be monitored. Take home message: Besson-Constant syndrome results by MTTP genetic mutation. Fat malabsorption leads to vitamin E, A, D, and K deficiency. This disease affects GIT, nerves, retina, bone, blood, and liver. Vitamin E is the most important long-term protective therapy. Early diagnosis and supplementation improve clinical outcome of this disease.
Work today is broken. We're all working in too many disconnected apps, and it's killing team productivity. But for the first time, there's a platform that fixes it by combining everything you need: projects, chat, and knowledge in one place. It's all powered by the world's most complete work AI, so you can find answers from anywhere and get work done faster. Introducing ClickUp, the everything app for work.
Every indication we have, whether it's GA4 and platform or incrementality testing, they all seem to indicate the same thing, and so I can't really deny facts that it's working.
The reality is, most digital ads never get a chance. But with Axon, Kobe was connected to over 1 billion potential customers inside mobile games. So watching Kobe's ads was the only way to keep playing.
Being able to have someone watch the whole thing, it's probably 90% of the battle when you're talking about digital marketing. You have an advantage with App 11 against some of the other placements that are skippable or you can scroll past.
Because when attention is scarce, whoever captures it wins. Profitable advertising made simple with Axon.
This is a 3. It's sloppily written and rendered at an extremely low resolution of 28 by 28 pixels, but your brain has no trouble recognizing it as a 3. And I want you to take a moment to appreciate how crazy it is that brains can do this so effortlessly. I mean, this, and this are also recognizable as 3s, even though the specific values of each pixel is very different from one image to the next. The particular light-sensitive cells in your eye that are firing when you see this 3 are very different from the ones firing when you see this 3. But something in that crazy smart visual cortex of yours resolves these as representing the same idea, while at the same time recognizing other images as their own distinct ideas. But if I told you, hey, sit down and write for me a program that takes in a grid of 28 by 28 pixels like this, and outputs a single number between 0 and 10, telling you what it thinks the digit is, well, the task goes from comically trivial to dauntingly difficult. Unless you've been living under a rock, I think I hardly need to motivate the relevance and importance of machine learning and neural networks to the present and to the future. But what I want to do here is show you what a neural network actually is, assuming no background, and to help visualize what it's doing. Not as a buzzword, but as a piece of math. My hope is just that you come away feeling like the structure itself is motivated, and to feel like you know what it means when you read or you hear about a neural network, quote-unquote, learning. This video is just going to be devoted to the structure component of that, and the following one is going to tackle learning. What we're going to do is put together a neural network that can learn to recognize handwritten digits. This is a somewhat classic example for introducing the topic. And I'm happy to stick with the status quo here, because at the end of the 2 videos, I want to point you to a couple good resources where you can learn more, and where you can download the code that does this and play with it on your own computer. There are many variants of neural networks, and in recent years there's been sort of a boom in research towards these variants, but in these 2 introductory videos, you and I are just going to look at the simplest plain vanilla form with no added frills. This is kind of a necessary prerequisite for understanding any of the more powerful modern variants, and trust me, it still has plenty of complexity for us to wrap our minds around. But even in this simplest form, it can learn to recognize handwritten digits, which is a pretty cool thing for a computer to be able to do. And at the same time, you'll see how it does fall short of a couple hopes that we might have for it. As the name suggests, neural networks are inspired by the brain. But let's break that down. What are the neurons, and in what sense are they linked together? Right now, when I say neuron, all I want you to think about is a thing that holds a number, specifically a number between 0 and 1. It's really not more than that. For example, the network starts with a bunch of neurons corresponding to each of the 28 times 28 pixels of the input image, which is 784 neurons in total. Each one of these holds a number that represents the grayscale value of the corresponding pixel, ranging from 0 for black pixels up to 1 for white pixels. This number inside the neuron is called its activation, and the image you might have in mind here is that each neuron is lit up when its activation is a high number. So all of these 784 neurons make up the first layer of our network. Now jumping over to the last layer, this has 10 neurons, each representing one of the digits. The activation in these neurons, again, some number that's between 0 and 1, represents how much the system thinks that a given image corresponds with a given digit. There's also a couple layers in between, called the hidden layers, which, for the time being, should just be a giant question mark for how on earth this process of recognizing digits is going to be handled. In this network, I chose 2 hidden layers, each one with 16 neurons, and admittedly, that's kind of an arbitrary choice. To be honest, I chose 2 layers based on how I want to motivate the structure in just a moment. And 16? Well, that was just a nice number to fit on the screen. In practice, there is a lot of room for experiment with a specific structure here. The way the network operates, activations in one layer determine the activations of the next layer. And of course, the heart of the network, as an information processing mechanism, comes down to exactly how those activations from one layer bring about activations in the next layer. It's meant to be loosely analogous to how in biological networks of neurons, some groups of neurons firing cause certain others to fire. Now the network I'm showing here has already been trained to recognize digits, and let me show you what I mean by that. It means if you feed in an image, lighting up all 784 neurons of the input layer according to the brightness of each pixel in the image, that pattern of activations causes some very specific pattern in the next layer, which causes some pattern in the one after it, which finally gives some pattern in the output layer. And the brightest neuron of that output layer is the network's choice, so to speak, for what digit this image represents. And before jumping into the math for how one layer influences the next, or how training works, let's just talk about why it's even reasonable to expect a layered structure like this to behave intelligently. What are we expecting here? What is the best hope for what those middle layers might be doing? Well, when you or I recognize digits, we piece together various components. A 9 has a loop up top and a line on the right. An 8 also has a loop up top, but it's paired with another loop down low. A 4 basically breaks down into 3 specific lines and things like that. Now in a perfect world, we might hope that each neuron in the second to last layer corresponds with one of these subcomponents. That anytime you feed in an image with, say, a loop up top, like a 9 or an 8, there's some specific neuron whose activation is going to be close to 1. And I don't mean this specific loop of pixels. The hope would be that any generally loopy pattern towards the top sets off this neuron. That way, going from the third layer to the last one just requires learning which combination of subcomponents corresponds to which digits. Of course, that just kicks the problem down the road, because how would you recognize these subcomponents, or even learn what the right subcomponents should be? And I still haven't even talked about how